How you guys doing? Okay, so my name is Zach Kaplan. I'm the founder and CEO of Inventables, and we're a hardware store for designers. So I'm going to be making a very big announcement today, actually the biggest and most important announcement that our company has had since we started 12 years ago. Before I do that, I want to give you a little background about where this is coming from, who we are. So Inventables is a hardware store for designers. You're all familiar with hardware stores. Traditionally, hardware stores focus around people repairing their houses. Home repair, home maintenance, weekend warrior type stuff. And they're focused around that from the top down, from the selection they have in the aisles, from the locations they are to your house. And so we started a hardware store for designers so people who are developing products had that same kind of place to go and get stuff. So the number one question people ask me is like, okay, you have a hardware store for designers. You guys sell screws? And they think I'm going to say no, but yes, we sell screws, lots of different kind of screws. Not the kind of screws you would find at the normal hardware store, but tons of them nonetheless. The other piece that's a little bit different than a normal hardware store is we sell digital manufacturing equipment. So everybody here, who's here is familiar with a 3D printer? Like everybody. Okay, so everybody's heard of a 3D printer. We also sell things like laser cutters, CNC milling machines, vinyl cutters. So the connective tissue between all these things, the important thing to remember is not that it's a 3D printer, but that it's digital manufacturing. Digital because you're designing something on the computer, and manufacturing because you're actually making it right there on your desk. And this isn't really new. You're all probably familiar with automation, like in automobile factories or all sorts of different stuff that's going on in the Far East. What's new is that those multi-million-dollar technologies are now cheap enough that you can have it on your desktop. So the last piece, so you've got the nuts and bolts and screws, you've got the digital manufacturing equipment, and the last piece is materials. So we've got like 18,000 different materials, like wood, plastic, metal, you name it. So folks doing this kind of work can get one of something, not a million of something, not 100,000 of something, not 10,000 of something. You can order one of something, and we're in Chicago. If you're in Chicago and you order it like 9 or 10 in the morning, it's on your desk by 1 because we use these bike messengers. But if you're in the rest of the country or the rest of the world, UPS, USPS, you get the next day. So, so that's Inventables. It's a hardware store for designers. So that's where I'm coming from. That's the context we're coming from this announcement. So I'm from Chicago, and there's a lot of this kind of activity that's been happening in Chicago, not just this year, but for the last couple hundred years. And so this picture is actually from my grandfather's pop bottling plant. So they were on Grand Avenue in Chicago. When I saw this picture, it was hanging in my grandparents' house on the wall for many, many years. My grandpa actually recently passed away. And my grandma, when they were sort of packing up everything, said, like, hey, Zach, like, do you want to take anything from the house before we move? And I took this picture. And the reason I took this picture was because one of my first memories of really getting to know my grandpa was when they took me to the pop shop. It was called Montreal Beverage. And it was from a time when there were probably a couple hundred pop bottle manufacturers in the United States. Today we have basically Coke and Pepsi. But it was a different time. And for me, this was sort of the first introduction I had to the Industrial Revolution, even just industry in general. You know, like you're a little kid. I must have been like maybe 4 or 5, 6 years old, somewhere in there. And I'm getting walked around. There's all these like burly, gruff kind of guys. And so I was recently talking to one of my friends as I was preparing for this talk about this, and just like the impact or the significance about the Industrial Revolution. So The Economist, like all the different magazines are talking about the Industrial Revolution. So I started asking, like, who cares? Like, why is this important? Like, why is that a buzzword? And we started talking about the nuances of, like, so what does it mean? The first Industrial Revolution was started on the shores of Great Britain because a coal miner named Thomas Newcomen, he was selling tools to the people in the mines, and they were trying to get the water out of the mine because it kept flooding. And what I learned in this is this was all motivated by profit. The guy was just trying to make more money. And when the technologies were introduced, they had industrial costs, super expensive. The only people who could afford things and the first industrial revolution were companies. And over time, his got better, got improved. There's lots of these incremental improvements until the technologies had individual costs. So obviously, you don't all have steam engines here. But if you think about all the major technologies that came out of the multiple industrial revolutions, electricity, the car, the computer, they all got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper until they had costs that an individual could take. And it actually now becomes almost free to start. So these things start with industrial costs, only big companies, and they over time get better and better and better and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper until they have costs that an individual can have, and then it becomes free to start. So the best example of this that I could think of that relates to kind of what we're going to be announcing today started in 1977. So if you think back to 1977, the state of the art with computers looked something like this. So this is a machine from Digital Equipment Corporation, and as you can see, it takes up the entire room. And every single person in here who's got a cell phone, obviously all of you have a cell phone, have a computer in your cell phone that is more powerful than this machine. Which is funny, but it's true. And so you can tweet that out right now. Be very proud of yourself. And so at that time, the CEO of DEC, Ken Olsen, very famously said, there's no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. Which today is obviously ridiculous. I hear you guys laughing at him. But at the time, it made complete sense because computers filled rooms. And you only did very scientific things with it, very industrial things. Why the heck would you want one of those in your house? It doesn't even make sense. But there was that same buzz and excitement in the press about the future of the computer. And we're going to be like driving cars with them and flying airplanes. And people are like, yeah. The people doing computers were like, no, we're not. And so it's that same buzz that we're hearing right now with 3D printing. Everybody's asking, so is everybody going to have a 3D print in their house? So that's the question you should be asking yourself is, what did you think was going to happen back then? So my dad disagreed with Ken Olsen. And in about 1984, he got me one of these. So this is an Apple IIe. Raise your hand if you had an Apple IIe. Awesome. And so at the time, there was all this buzz about, like, what are the killer apps? This seems like a hobby. And there were hobby clubs, like the Homebrew Computer Club, where people would come, and they would take them apart, and they would tinker with them, and there were kits. So for me, as a 6-year-old, my killer app was Oregon Trail, which was awesome. But games were a significant killer app at that time. And most of the people doing this stuff were playing games. But it was cool. Like, it was just fun. And then things like VisiCalc came out. So as a 6-year-old, I wasn't doing a lot of spreadsheets, but my grandpa got me this. So it was called Quark. So I see the guy in the front row remembers Quark. But if you're sort of under 25, you have no clue what the heck I'm talking about. So Quark was one of the first desktop publishing software packages. It basically took that computer and made it into a way you could design a magazine, a book, a newspaper. And I thought this was the coolest thing in the world. Because before then, I just had a word processor. So you would look at like the newspaper, and they had the columns and the pictures. And I would type my thing, and it was just like line, 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 line. Picture in the middle, line, line, line. Like, why didn't mine look like theirs? Didn't seem fair. I was like, how are they doing this? I was so frustrated. So he gave me this, and I tried to see if I could make a newspaper that was indistinguishable from the Chicago Tribune. So I dutifully did this for, I think, 2 to 3 weeks, because I had to figure out how to use the software. I'm like asking all these questions. I'm going on like the message boards at the time. He got me like a Zoom modem, like 1200 baud. It's kind of ridiculous. So I wasn't very good at my newspaper, but in 1977, there were 134,000 books published. That's a lot of books. And for the first time, the drafts of those books started coming off printers like this. So I had one of these, and I can't remember the exact cost, but it was definitely in the thousands of dollars. I remember going to the little Apple retailer. It wasn't like an Apple store. It was like this like horrible thing with like ripped seats that you sat down. And I was a little scared. The guy had like one of those button-down shirts with the short sleeves. And black pants, you're like, are we supposed to be here? So we got this thing, and I remember I printed out my newspaper, and you had the tracks, so you had to like peel the tracks off the newspaper. And I went downstairs to our kitchen, and I put the Chicago Tribune next to my newspaper, and I called my mom over, and I was like, I wanted to see if she could tell the difference between mine and the Trib. And she looked at me, and she was like, very good. Because obviously, if you saw something off this, it was terrible, and whatever. So that was sort of early 80s. And now if you go online, you buy a Dell computer, they ship you an inkjet printer for free. So we've gone from in industrial presses that the Tribune had in that big shop on the side of Chicago to a couple $1,000s where this crappy, I'm like peeling the tracks off, to now they like force you, they give you the printer, you didn't even ask for it, it just shows up when you order your computer. And that's in the span from 1977 to today. So the implication is, so again, who cares? But I started thinking about, so what is the implication of that? What's the result? What's the impact? So I looked this up, and there's recently a study that said in 2010, 316,000 books were published. So in all of that time, we, as a country, we tripled the number of books that were published from the computer. Pretty good. But most people at South by Southwest are not impressed by tripling. It's not very exponential. And I was kind of like, really? It's good, but like, I mean, every single person in this audience can literally tweet out to thousands of people, write a blog post. While this guy right there is writing a blog post right now, I can see you. Yes, you. It seems like that's not enough. So it turns out the subline on this was through the traditional channels. So this is through HarperCollins or Random House or all these other places where there's gatekeepers. The interesting part is that 2.7 million books were published through the non-traditional channels. Holy cow, 2.7 million. So what's happened here is the gatekeepers got removed from the process. All those people you had to pitch your idea to who knew better are no longer part of it. You don't have to ask, do you want my book? Will you sign my book? You just have to type it and click upload, and now you're on a Kindle. Now you're on every device. Now you're on an iPad. But also, if you actually want to print it, you just, the presses will just print for self-publishers, 2.7 million. This is actually the stat on how many books were published on demand, so actually in paper, not just ebooks. That's astounding. And so that is the real implication, is now it is not about who can get through the gatekeepers. It is not about who can get that stipend or that advance. It's about who has the creative ideas, who has the passion, and who wants to go out there and bring their ideas to the world. That's awesome. And so the implication of this is that we're now seeing a couple of different things happen. One is creative ideas that would have never surfaced get out there. And you're going to see some massive hits that come from people in places you would have never expected. The second thing is that because we have all of this new content, more people can get in the game. Chris Anderson talks about the long tail. This explosion of content means more people have content that they're interested in that they can participate with. And so it's no longer about hits, it's about fans. And you can build your fan base before you even launch your book. So when you launch it, you know you're going to have something that your customers want. So as I started thinking about this and started thinking about what we're doing here, I thought that this is really, I lived over the last 12 years the same thing, but instead of with books and digital media and websites, which is cool, with physical stuff. So when I started Inventables, it was 2002. The average cost of some of these digital manufacturing tools at the time was about $500,000. If you go take, I recently took a tour of the Harley-Davidson factory in Kansas City, Missouri. Most of the machines they have in that factory are all digital, but they're about $1 million each. And the humans literally just walk up to the machines and they take the parts off and then put them next to it and do some sort of little inspection and some of the bolting. But the robots move it from machine to machine. The robots are welding, they're cutting, they're forming, all this stuff. But the machines are about $1 million. And it takes a team of engineers to repair them and service them and set them up. So I graduated from college, and shortly after started Inventables, and I was most interested in getting involved in product development. I was most passionate. I did mechanical engineering at school, and I just wanted to get involved. Obviously, I didn't have a couple $1 million. and I didn't really want to work at a big company, but I wanted to be in the thick of product development. And so my parents saw there was a Nightline video that came out by this company called IDEO. So they're a design consultancy. And it was like Disneyland for designers. Like these guys were like the coolest guys. They had a airplane wing in their office. It was like the most awesome place you could ever imagine. And this guy, his name is Peter Skillman, was sort of the main character in this Nightline thing. And their idea was kind of crazy. They said, okay, we're going to bring Nightline cameras in. So like Ted Koppel was like the dude back then. And they're like, we're going to redesign a shopping cart in a week. And so my parents saw this. I'm at college. I'm obviously not watching Nightline. And they bought the VHS tape, like the transcript or whatever, and they sent it to me at school. And they're like, Zach, you have to see this. You have to like check these guys out, because I was like obsessed with this stuff. And I remember like Peter, he was like this really creative kind of dude, and they had no idea it was a bad idea. Like in school, you're like, oh, I did the math problem wrong. Like I wasn't really that great at math. So I was constantly getting like all the feedback from professors was like, no, you did it wrong. Your calculus is wrong. You did it wrong. These guys were like, hey, whatever you want, man. Good idea, bad idea. Yeah, no, we're going to defer judgment. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because you could sort of get to that next step. So a couple years later, so I started Inventables, but the only people we could have as customers were people that could pay big money, because it took big money to make products. And so the average cost of our subscriptions was about $100,000. And at the time, if you wanted access to the hardware store, you had to pay $100,000, because the people doing product development had that kind of cash, and it was about the cost of an engineer. So Peter had left IDEO, and he went to go work at Palm, and he was one of those customers. He signed up because he just got what we were doing. The idea was you would have these little problems. So he was working on the design of the Palm Pre. So they had just gone through the Palm 5 and all this stuff, and they were having this horrible problem, which was people were sending back their screens cracked. And the reason they were cracked is because they had that docking station that cost about 3 cents to make, and the cord would just whip it off the desk, and then the thing, this is before cases, obviously. So the thing would just crack. And this is hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the CEO was like, Peter, fix it. So he was like, okay. So this was our hardware store at the time. It was basically a display, and you walked up to it, and the dream that I had was people would just go, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, idea. And then, like, problem solved, right? So that's not what happened. Most of our customers, 90%, our customers at that time, they were like Fortune 500 companies, right? Thousands of employees, hundreds of designers, Nike, Procter & Gamble, Black & Decker, Palm, you name it. Most of the people working in those companies were not like Peter. Like, I watched Peter on TV. I'm like, this is awesome. No. They worked at bigger companies. They sat in cubicles. They really didn't like deferring judgment. They kind of wanted it to work the first time the right way. And their bosses, or the money people, so to speak, were risk averse. And why were they risk averse? It wasn't irrational. They were risk averse because they had invested all of this money in this equipment that made their product. And it was expensive, and it was huge risks. So they didn't want to change anything because they had that cash machine going. We were out at Colgate. They make toothpaste, right? They make toothpaste so fast, you can't see the tubes going as it's going like that. You don't want to be the guy who like messed up the machine that makes the toothpaste. Not good. So really scary to make a change, really scary to do something new. But Peter was this freewheeling dude, and he came up and he's like, okay, I'm going to solve this problem. And he found this stuff. It was called suction cup tape. And basically one side was an adhesive and one side was these tiny microscopic suction cups. So if you had a microscope and you put it on this stuff, you would see little divots. So he's like, this is it. And he ended up putting it on the back. This is the bottom of their dock. And so it stuck to the table or the window, wherever you wanted it, and the phone just fit right there. So this is a huge success for Palm. It was the quintessential example of what we were trying to accomplish with Inventables. Give people all these different materials that help you solve a problem. And then the moral of the story is what that process took 2 years. So from the first meeting where we were sitting in their conference room to CES, where he announced it and they won all these awards, was a 2-year process. Which I thought, this is one of the highlights of my life. We went out for beers. It was so awesome. Just to even get to work with the guy. So roughly 6 months after that experience, the guy on the left, Anthony, so these two guys, they had just graduated. They're both Chicago guys. One went to IIT on the south side, and the other guy went to UIC. They were both mechanical engineers. And I got an email from Anthony. So he had seen some of the CES press buzz, and he was interested in the suction cup tape. Now, just to give you a sense, I get these emails all the time. All these little guys, like they got an idea, they're an inventor, and our customers are, at this time, you have to think back, they're paying us $100,000. So, but he seemed very genuine, very nice. And so I was like, oh yeah, I understand, that's cool. Okay, so here, you don't really have enough money to sign up, so I'll just give you the contact information of vendor, and then you just take care of it yourself. He's like, okay. So he writes me back, and he's like, can I come over? And they're in Chicago, and I'm like, Jesus. All right. I'm like, if you can come over at 5 on Friday, I'll meet you. Great. So he comes over at 5 on Friday. He brings his prototype. He brings Russ. He's like, okay, we have this problem. The bottom, they're making this thing. It's a joystick for the iPhone. So the iPhone had just come out. These guys are hardcore gamers. Do you know how hard it is to do a shoot-'em-up game on an iPhone with a touchscreen? Come on. Really? This is obviously not the gaming part of South by Southwest. It's hard, right? And these guys are frustrated because they're losing. He's like, we need a way to attach our joystick button to the iPhone, but not mar the screen. Because people aren't going to deal with like a marring screen. Like they want it, but they also want to like do other stuff. So he's like, I saw that suction cup tape that you guys have with Palm. How do we do it? So we go through the whole thing, and I'm like, okay, I'll spend some time with you. I email, CC, intro him to the vendor, and I think that's the rest of it. Okay. So Anthony writes back a couple of weeks later, and he's like, okay, this is awesome. We need 3,000 units. I was like, Anthony, like, what the heck? We discussed this. He's like, no. We need 3,000 units, and we really want to place the order today. Do you take credit card? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, dude, purchase order. Have you ever heard of it? And he's like, no. Like, I don't know what a purchase order is, but we need 3,000 units, like, as soon as you can ship. Our Kickstarter just ended, and we need to ship to our factory. I'm like, you have a factory? He's like, well, there's this place in India that we found on Alibaba, and if you could just ship it there, they like do all the assembly. I'm like, okay, your Kickstarter? And he's like, you haven't heard of Kickstarter? And at the time, it was like very early, right? So they had raised like $33,000 for this thing, and they already had all the money. And he's like, so I want to pay. So I literally had just come back from that Colgate meeting where we sat in a room and they had brought all the executives of R&D. There was probably 12 of them. And they're debating all these ideas, and then like nothing happened. And like nobody was like, they were a little excited about some of them, but not like too excited. Sort of like just another meeting that you'd have, corporate meeting. These guys were intense. They're coming over. He's like, no, we need this stuff. It's awesome. Like, look at this thing. He's like demoing it for me. He's like, we've tested it. We like got your sample. I'm like, all right. So I called the vendor and said, like, can we just sell it to him? He's like, yeah, I don't care. So we took his credit card. He shipped it. And this really caused me pause because I was like, these two guys knew absolutely nothing. But they finished the whole project and shipped to their customers in 6 months. He knew nothing. They had just graduated. They actually both had full-time jobs at the time. That's messed up. So a little more time goes by, and then we meet this guy. So this guy, it's actually two people. So the guy who invented this, his name is Edward Ford, and he's from Dixon, Illinois. So if you're from Chicago, how many people are from Chicago here? Awesome. 2.5 hours west, almost at the border of Iowa. This guy lives in Dixon, Illinois, and he invented a machine called a CNC milling machine for $300. That was his goal. Open source. And Edward's goal with this whole CNC milling machine was he really just wanted to invite some buddies over, drink some beer on the weekend. He worked in IT and cut out some stuff on his CNC. And he worked at like, one of those factories out in Dixon where it cost about 50 cents a square foot for the facility, and they're making these industrial equipment. And so he did a Kickstarter. On his Kickstarter, his goal that he was trying to raise was about $1,200. Yeah, you're laughing because like $1,200 for a Kickstarter? So this is early. He was using Kickstarter for what they intended, like a project that he wanted to do with some buddies, not like to start a company. So it ended up, he did a video, he's like, hi, I'm Edward, blah, blah, blah. He raised over $10,000, and he was scared to death because who the heck were these people? He didn't want $10,000, he wanted $1,200. So he starts ordering all these parts. So one of the guys that bought it was this guy. His name is Brandon Fisher, and he lived in LA at the time. And it's open source, so he's got all the plans online. He's not starting a business. He's just doing this project. And Brandon buys it. And one of the first things Brandon does, because it was little, is makes it bigger. Because Brandon didn't want to do like little things. He wanted to do big things. And specifically, Brandon wanted to cut out these. So under that little dust shoe, there's a little milling bit made out of steel. And Brandon went to Home Depot and bought a sheet of wood. And he went onto his computer and drew a design. Actually copied it 3 times. And these are longboards, because Brandon lived in the suburbs of LA, and everybody's a longboarder. And he cut out 3, and he got some trucks, and he made a skateboard. And he put it up online, and a couple people bought them. That's pretty cool. So we had the idea in the morning, went to the Home Depot, put it on the machine, 3 skateboards later. So now Brandon's bill of materials, total cost for the wood and the trucks and the screws and everything is $50. And he goes online and looks at comparable ones, and they're selling for $200. And he actually was able to customize it. So each one of those 3 had a different logo. And one, he put Shapeoko on it and shipped it to Edward for free. Okay, so this whole process took Brandon 1 day. 2 years, 6 months, 1 day. Think about that. 2 years, 6 months, 1 day. That's messed up. This guy's manufacturing skateboards in his garage for the same scale bill of materials that the actual skateboard companies have. They're selling it for $200. That's messed up. Think about that. Like, you're not reacting, but that is messed up. This guy has a manufacturing facility literally in his garage in LA. And the first picture that he sent me, he was wearing the skateboard without shoes. And I was like, I can't show that at South by Southwest. He's like, why not? I'm like, you're not wearing shoes. He's like, dude, nobody in LA is wearing shoes. So I made him send this one, so it was like a little more appropriate for you guys. 1 day. Okay? So what does that mean? What's the implication? Who cares? What I believe is that digital manufacturing is transforming not just how goods are made, but more importantly, and this is the big one, who can make them? Because Brandon doesn't have the bucks that Colgate has, but he's got a skateboard company. Or at least the ability to make skateboards if he wants, because he sold a couple and then he decided, he also has a full-time job. He doesn't want to be a skateboard manufacturer. But the cool thing is he can make whatever he wants. And so how goods are made and who can make them, it's changing the game. The same way that everybody in this audience could be an author, in a few years, and actually right now, everyone can also be a manufacturer. And so we're moving from a time when product development was about form and function. Form and function. If you go to, we go to the industrial design conference year after year, and there's this debate. Is it about form or function? Form first or function first? Form and function. Which one? It is not about form or function. Now what is it about fans? It has changed. The reason they had to debate form and function is they had to get it right the first time. And they were going to spend so much money to get it right. Test it, test it, test it, test it. And then they're like, I hope this works, I hope this works. They put all the money into the machine. They make $1 million. And it works or it didn't. And that was sort of the fate of the company. There wasn't time to screw up. You think Brandon cares about form and function? He doesn't give a shit about form and function. He's like, I just want a skateboard. And most of the people who are doing this, they are not thinking in those terms either. They're thinking about fans. We went from a time, so when this stuff was happening, we had about 200 customers in Inventables. Today, we have almost 30,000. So in a period of like 2.5 years, we went from 200 customers to 30,000 customers. And this is just the beginning. Like, it is just starting. We were out at South by Southwest Create. Most people that came up to our booth had never heard of digital manufacturing. They'd heard of a 3D printer, but they'd never actually seen one. And they actually thought that our CNC mill was a 3D printer, which is so cool because finally people care about what's going on here. And they're interested, and they're trying to get in there and do stuff. So the flip side is we're living in a very hard time in the United States. I see people nodding because you probably read the same article I did. So this was all over the place. This was in the HuffPo. It was the AP Newswire did this big thing. NPR did this study. And you see this is interesting because in America, of the folks who have graduated from a 4-year degree program, graduated from college, within the last year and a half, 53% of them are unemployed or underemployed. 53%. So I heard that, and I'm like, yeah, statistics, okay, thank you, NPR, you're geniuses. You read down a little bit further, that equates to 1.5 million people. 1.5 million people who have just graduated from college, the place you go to get a job, to learn how to do things, are unemployed or underemployed. That's messed up. You read down further, 500,000 of those people, of the 1.5 million, got a technical degree. Yeah, that's messed up. So we live in a time when even if you go to college, you are not guaranteed a job. That is very scary. And we live in a time when other countries that they call low-cost countries, are getting all of the manufacturing jobs. Because, why did we didn't just start that this year, we started that decades ago. Why did we all go to all these other countries? We went there because it was cheaper. These people weren't being unpatriotic, they were trying to make a living. And they went there because it was cheaper, because the labor costs in these low-cost countries, you get $1 an hour, $2 an hour. The labor costs in America are $10 an hour, $15 an hour, $30 an hour. That's a big difference. 2 hours of work in America is like 30 hours of work in a low-cost country. That's different. But when you think about what Brandon did, he just put the material on and clicked start, and the machine did all the work. So all that's about to change. And there's this incredible opportunity for these 1.5 million people to do something besides get a job. If you look at net new job growth, which is a fancy way of saying jobs that didn't exist, that exist before, majority of that comes from companies with 50 or less employees. So it's 1 to 50 employees. And almost all of our customers at Inventables, all those 30,000 people, they start their business when they have a full-time job or have just been laid off. And they're doing this dance. Like, I got a job, but I'm doing this other thing, but I'm doing this other thing, but I got a job. And they do it for a period of time, and they get a machine. Or, like in Chicago, the Harold Washington Library, it's free. They've got all of these machines. They put in 3D printer, they put in laser cutters, they put in CNC milling machines. And you can go for free and make stuff. And people do. And they go on sites like Etsy, and they go on sites like Kickstarter, and they go on Amazon Fulfillment, because distribution used to be about pitching the guy at Walmart, or pitching the guy at Target, or pitching the guy at whatever store you wanted to get into, Best Buy, Circuit City, whatever. Circuit City's gone. Amazon doesn't care if you sell 1 or 1,000 or 10 million. They charge you 30 cents plus like a $39.95 fee to put all your stuff there, and they will ship it prime to any location in the country with 2-day shipping. So the gatekeepers, just like the publishers, are gone. They're irrelevant. If I would have stood up here 10 years ago and said Circuit City is going to go out of business, you'd be like, yeah, okay. They're gone. Best Buy is scared. Staples is scared. They're trying to figure, Radio Shack just closed 1,000 stores, or 500 stores, I can't remember the exact number, but a lot of stores, right? All these folks who have all these retail locations are scared. The gatekeeper doesn't know the answer, but you guys do know the answer. And you're voting with your dollars, and with your energy, and with your likes, and with your tweets every day, and you're doing a better job voting than they were. And so there's this opportunity for all of these folks to just start their own company, because you don't need $1 million. You don't need venture capital. It's the same as starting a website now if you want to get into digital manufacturing. And so today, now that you have a little bit of background about what we're talking about here, today at South by Southwest, I'm going to introduce you to the next announcement in Inventables. So this is the second in a series of 3 announcements that we're making. So the first one was made in October of 2013, so a few months back. And the first one was this thing. So it's the second version of Edward's machine. It's called the Shapeoko 2. And it's a $650 CNC milling machine. So for $650, you basically get a kit, you screw it all together, and then you are a manufacturer. So we're about 3 or 4 months in now. We have already sold as many Shapeoko 2s as we sold Shapeoko 1s in the first year and a half. It is the fastest selling CNC milling machine in the history of the world. That was announcement number 1. Today is announcement number 2. And to give you some context for why I believe this is so important, I believe this announcement is actually more important than Shapeoko 2 because of this kind of stuff. So when we launched Shapeoko 1, all these hackers and makers started buying it. People who don't need it to be assembled. They're perfectly comfortable buying the Shapeoko 1 and sort of screwing it together and doing things like Brandon did. If it doesn't work, they're like, oh, no problem. They actually like the fact that it doesn't work because they didn't buy it because they wanted to start a company. They bought it because they were looking for a project, just like Edward. And to the point where we would go out and say, what are you making? And they're like, what do you mean, what am I making? They're like, what are you making with the machine? They're like, I made a new kind of mount for the electronics because I wanted that to be like a little smoother. They would rather buy the upgrades to upgrade and bling the thing out than to actually make anything useful. It was eye-opening for me. You start getting down to the second thousand, the third thousand people, and you find guys like this. So these coasters were done by a guy, actually in Dallas. His name is Matt McCoy. And he has a store inside Six Flags. One of those stores right under the roller coaster. You walk in, and their idea, it used to be, you've all been to this thing where you walk in, you tell them your name, and then like the guy cuts it out on the saw. So that's how it started back in the 70s. And Matt took it over a few years ago, and now they have all this digital manufacturing equipment. 3D printers and CNC mills and lasers. So Matt has a store, and you walk up to the counter, and it's called Minifab, and they're like, what do you want to make? And they've got a bunch of things you can make, and you say it, and by the time you get to the other end of the counter, you're walking away with the thing you just made. And it's magic. So I flew down to Dallas just to see this thing, because I was like, really? Like, you have like a store? And we got to go in Six Flags like before it opened, and they're setting it all up, and like the music is playing, like do-do-do-do-do. Like, it's the real deal, and it's awesome. So he's also got an Etsy store. And I was like, wait, so you're making the stuff in the Six Flags to give to people, and then you also have an Etsy store? Like, does Six Flags care? And he's like, well, they were a little uncomfortable at first, but then they realized it was bringing people to the park because they just wanted to see our stuff and how we make it. And so he actually has a line outside his store in the Six Flags for this stuff next to the roller coasters. So people are paying to go into Six Flags just to see the guy's store. Awesome. So these coasters are actually, so Matt's a designer, right? These coasters are made of Corian. So you're probably familiar with Corian from countertops. And then he's inset Quark. And he sells them as a thing of four. So he's made that on the Shapeoko. The next guys are in Chicago. So the coaster thing is cool. Like, everybody's seen the Etsy stuff, and then you say like, yeah, but it's Etsy. Okay, cool. But the implication is there's over 1.5 million pieces of jewelry on Etsy. That's a lot of jewelry. So these next guys, they're actually in Chicago. And we were looking for folks that were interested in this. And it's a company called Drift Eyewear. So these guys manufacture, they got about 5 guys in the company. They manufacture these glasses. So these are acetate in the front and wood in the back. And they've got about 7 machines. But one of them is a CNC mill. So we went over there, took a look at the shop, and they're just like, just straight up, like normal guys, total chill, nothing fancy. They also recently graduated. One of them had a job and got laid off. And he's like, yeah, man. He worked in high-speed manufacturing, and they were doing some downsizing. And he's like, I love this stuff, but man, when you're working on that high-speed manufacturing stuff, they just sort of squeeze the creativity out of it. And he's like, I don't even know who we're making it for. And so he really wanted to just take all that creative energy and put it into something he was passionate about, put it into something he cared about. And before they launched the store, he just spent like a year and a half doing research because he loved it, and meeting people and talking to people and going into the normal retailers and talking to people and saying, like, so do you like the selection? And they're like, they kind of all look the same. He's like, yeah. He is passionate. The guy's name is Chris Mance, and he loves this company. And his customers love his company. They don't have customers. These guys have fans. They've got real fans. Because you wear those things, and you're like proud. You're like, yeah, man, Drift Eyewear. They're subtle, they're cool, but it shows that you're cool and you're different. And they tap into that. It's not for everybody. It's not everybody's style. But they can also make it the exact size of your head. And so he's competing with a multinational conglomerate. So these guys, they have actually about a $12,000 CNC milling machine in their shop. And it fits on a table like this. And it came with this really complicated piece of software to do it. And we went over there, and we brought over the machine, and like we were talking. They're giving us a tour of all the different things. So we get to the mill. And we totally thought. So Michael is in charge of our marketing. He's like, yeah, let's not even like show them what we're doing because like they have this like industrial thing. They're just gonna think it's a joke. So they get over to the CNC mill, and Chris is like, okay, so stand back, like be careful, like we can't mess this thing up. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, okay, first of all, that is super expensive. Second of all, I am the only one in this company who knows how to run it. And if you mess that up, we're down. Like, that's it. No more glasses for all the customers. And we have orders. So, like, I understand that I made an exception that you want to do this tour. But, like, please, don't mess this up for me, dude. I'm like, all right, just relax. You don't need to, like, turn it on. So he shows me, and it's, like literally in process. And we plop this thing down. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so we have this idea. Like, it's cheap, and you can just, like, try it. He's like, this is interesting. But, like, tolerances, blah, 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 all these technical things. I'm like, okay, just relax. So we put up the thing that I'm going to show you today, and he tries it, and in less than 5 minutes, we made our first pair of glasses. And he's like, whoa, it really makes the glasses? I was like, yeah, there's the glasses. So the sales guy was like, can I try it? And so at Drift, one of the things that they talk about is the fact that everybody is a craftsman in the company. But they say that, but really I meant everybody who works in the shop is a craftsman in the company, not the sales guy. So we sit him down, and he's nervous because like Chris has told him like, dude, do not touch the CNC mill. No circumstances. You do the sales guy thing, I do the milling thing. So he's like, is it okay? And Chris got a phone call, like went away, and like you could see the guy's blood pressure like went down. And I was like, just relax. He's like, okay, I don't want to break it. I'm like, dude, don't worry. So I'm like, what do you want to make? Because Chris had like fixtured in a pair of glasses. He's like, I'm so sick of glasses. Like, I don't want to make glasses. I'm like, what do you want to make? He's like, I want to make a comb handle. I was like, okay, so we take out the glasses thing. We grab a piece of wood out of the garbage, right? You don't like mess the thing up. So he draws a comb handle, and he's like, I want to put the city of Chicago flag on there. So we add some stars. He's like, okay, now what? I'm like, click start. He clicks it. It makes it. He's like, oh, my God. So he undoes it, takes it out, and he's like, oh, my God, it looks like I drew it. He runs into the office. Chris is like still on the phone with this other guy. He's like, Chris, look at this. Look at this. He's like, I made a comb handle. He's like, okay, relax. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So the last thing is these guys. And these guys are actually, I saw them outside on the street as Irby. So they did a Kickstarter. They raised a bunch of money. And they're making about $1,000 electric scooters out of aluminum. So I didn't even know this, but they bought one of the machines. They didn't even like call us after, just bought it. And they prototyped the parts for the scooter on the thing to do a lot of iteration, and then they sent it out. It's just like three dudes. They like rented an RV. They like bombed CES and like went all rogue on it, and just made the product. They were passionate about it. It's like three dudes in an RV. So today, at South by Southwest, the announcement that we're making is we're launching Easel. So what's Easel? Roughly 2 years ago, April of 2012, when we launched the Shapeoko 1, the hobbyist community, the maker community, started buying the machine. And like I told you, they were most interested in hacking it. The kinds of software tools that were available to them at that time were either super expensive or open source. The open source ones are free, but unless you're really technical, unless you're willing to go into GitHub and make patches, unless you're willing to install and uninstall 17 things and look through wikis and you understand the screens I'm talking about, it was really inaccessible to you. So there was three tools they needed. They needed a CAD package, stands for Computer Aided Design. They needed a CAM package, stands for Computer Aided Manufacturing. They needed a machine control package that actually tells the computer, sends the information to the machine on where to go. CAD, CAM, and machine control. They are perfectly comfortable rolling their own, downloading, installing, going to GitHub, patching things. We actually met a guy at Seattle at the Maker House, and we were talking about this project, and he's like, oh, I kind of like patching the software. It gives me a little bit of control. So over the summer, we found, summer of 2012, we found this other thing called MakerCam. It was free. It was in browser. And when I saw this, I was like, this is it. Awesome. It combined the CAD and the CAM. You still had to export to the machine control, but not a big deal. So one of my friends bought this just because he's into this kind of stuff. He has a 3D printer. And he is very prominent in the testing community. His name is Jason Huggins. He built the Angry Birds robot. It like plays Angry Birds live. He like demoed it. And I showed him MakerCam. I just emailed it to him. I'm like, yeah, dude, check this out. Like we solved the software problem. No big deal. Fully expecting him to come back like, yes, it's so awesome. He comes back and he's like, yeah, dude, what is a toolpath? I was like, oh my God. Are you serious? He's like, I don't know, pockets, profiles, like cutting, like depth of pass. What am I supposed to do? I was like, wow. If the guy who invented the Angry Birds playing robot cannot figure out the software, we have a problem. Because that thing knows how to win Angry Birds with like a back of an eraser thing. It was intense. So we went through this process and went to a hackathon at University of Chicago and found a student who, I went to the hackathon and basically said, okay, this stuff is really cool. The software's terrible. Can you fix it? And the students were like, oh, this is interesting. So 24 hours go by. They're like eating, lots of soda. I go home, go to sleep. I come back on Sunday, and one of the students had a demo where he could, in the browser, do a digital lathe and send the instructions to the printer, and he printed out the thing that he had just done on the screen. And he was like, yeah, it was pretty cool, but I wanted to be able to do it with my fingers because the mouse is kind of janky, so I just ported it into iPad. I was like, what? Like, who is this dude? So he ended up, his name is Paul Kaplan. He ended up winning the hackathon. They got him a 3D printer, and then when he graduated in June, we hired him. So June of 2013. So we worked for a year getting these things together. And the last 3 or 4 months, the rest of our engineering team joined him. And we're launching Easel. So Easel, you go to easel.com, and it's 100% free. Free to use. And there's 3 parts to it. The first part is that you pick your material. The second part is that you do your design or import your design. And the third part is you click send, and it starts cutting. So the idea, we took a step back. All of the industry stuff is very complicated. 3D design, if you've ever tried it, is very complicated. So we didn't incrementally improve what was already there. We started from scratch with a person who had never really done, his background was in physics. He had never done digital manufacturing. He didn't even know what CAD was. We're like introducing all this stuff for the first time. And said like, what if everybody else wanted to participate in this? And what if you wanted to be able to do your first thing in under 5 minutes for free? And that was really the vision. Can we get someone who's never done this before, but knows how to use a computer to make something in under 5 minutes? And so we rethought it from the ground up. Number one, it had to be in the browser, so then you could access it at home, at school, at the lab, like wherever you are. You don't have to, like, no USB sticks or all that nonsense. And the second thing is, like, it was really hard for people to design in 3D, so I just like, got rid of all that. And you design it on the left in 2D, and the computer or the software just magically shows you what that would look like in 3D. And so it eliminates all those settings and all that technical jargon, because you just pick the material you want, and it looks like what you have on the thing. And then you just plug it in, you take your USB cord, you plug it in, you click go, and it just starts working. So it doesn't ask you for speeds or feeds or settings or cutting direction or any of that stuff. You just draw what you want, and that's it. So I'm going to show you just a small video that we did to kind of explain it, and so you can watch. Inventables is a hardware store for designers, but our focus is that we help people go from idea to finished product. We're trying to democratize product development. So you don't need a lot of money, you just need a good idea and a lot of passion to bring your idea to reality. Today, at this moment, we invite you to try Easel.
I'm Paul Kaplan. I'm a software engineer at Inventables. I build websites that can control machines. A CNC mill is a computer-controlled cutting machine that can take digital designs and cut them into physical materials.
The kinds of products and projects you can make with Easel use real materials, real woods, plastics, and soft metals like aluminum.
CNC mills used to be huge machines used in industry, but they've shrunk down and now they're desktop CNC machines that are under $1,000. But the software was still made specifically for engineers.
If we're really going to start seeing hundreds of thousands and then millions of manufacturers making products that they're passionate about, the software needs to change. The software needs to become more accessible for the rest of us.
The key to the software is that it lets you design in 2 dimensions and it gives you a preview in 3 dimensions of what your design actually looks like. You can adjust the cut depth of that path, and you can see it updated live in 3D.
The software allows you to walk up to a computer with no background and experience, design something, click, and in less than 5 minutes, you'll be holding in your hand that item that you just designed.
I hope that regular people would be inspired, that they can be creative. Anybody can make things. Anybody can create beautiful objects.
The two biggest problems with all the software options today are they're complicated and expensive. With Easel, we decided to make the easiest, most intuitive software that's also free to use. We invite you to try Easel and join us in igniting the third industrial revolution by making something you're passionate about. Thank you. So how about a demo? All right, so we're going to do something very dangerous, which is to do a live demo on stage. So now, we're from Chicago, and as you're starting to hear, like Chicago is really the center of gravity for all this stuff, for all this digital manufacturing stuff. We had the first $1 million Kickstarter with Scott Wilson and the Lunatic watches and the guys at Minimal. We have the Museum of Science and Industry, which is one of the best science industry museums in the world. We have the fastest selling CNC machine in the history of the world. And at the Chicago Public Library, it's also happening with the public sector, where they have built a maker lab that is 100% free for anyone to come. You don't even need a library card. They've put it before the little beeper things, so you can come. They have free classes. They have free materials. They have free open lab time. And we at Inventables have since hired 2 people who found out about us because they came to the lab. They were unemployed to just start getting started. And so Chicago is a history, hundreds of years of manufacturing, and now, a couple weeks ago, they just announced there's going to be a public-private partnership where they're going to have an over $300 million digital manufacturing center. And so, when I started doing this 12 years ago, most people in the public did not care about what we were doing, but people in industry did. And now, the city is so excited about what we're doing that we have a very special guest to come up here. The mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, is going to do the demo.
Hey, Zach.
How you doing?
I'm good. You?
Good. All right, so have a seat.
Stand back.
So we've made this so easy, even a mayor could do it.
There goes that public funding.
Yeah, he's quick. Okay, so you go to easel.com, and so today we're going to make a bottle opener. So we've been making these things all weekend at the booth, and you can actually do it yourself if you go to our booth.
You have to bring your own bottle, though.
You have to bring your own bottle. So one side says Easel, and the other side, I did my name, which is Zach. So we're going to do one that says Rahm. So the idea is you go new from template, because you didn't bring your bottle opener file today, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. And then when you do that, it's going to pop up the bottle opener template, which basically just looks like the piece of wood I have here. And then we're going to go up here and pick a font. So I'm going to pick this one. And then we're going to type your name. So how do you spell that?
Yeah. R.
Yeah.
We're going to go slow for you.
Okay.
A.
Yeah.
H.
Yeah.
M.
Okay. So we got Rahm. And click away. So now it's just like PowerPoint or anywhere where you can just kind of move it around. And so I'm going to put the Rahm. But we got these little lines like they have in Keynote there. So it shows you now we're in the center. The cool thing is on this right side, it's showing you how deep it is. And this little meter here, you can go all the way to the top, and now you can't see it. All the way to the bottom if you want to cut it all the way through. So you can zoom in and out. So like, okay, it's actually there.
Hasn't gone anywhere.
Hasn't gone anywhere. All right, so now I'm going to just put it up to a little bit so we can do this in one pass. Okay, so this is the cool part now. So I'm just going to take the USB cord. I'm going to plug it in. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it just went from machine not connected to start cutting. Go ahead. So the mayor has clicked start cutting. Thank you. So now it's just going to ask you.
All 4 digits right here.
It's going to ask you the thickness of the material. So today we're using an 1/8-inch piece of material. We're going to clamp it down. So we've already clamped it down, but we're just going to check to make sure that the mayor didn't move it. It's cool. We're cool. It's going to ask you to measure the bit. So today we're using a 32nd, but if you had a larger one, you could just pick it.
Can't believe I flew all the way to Austin to get insulted, but thanks.
Okay, so we're at 0. You just want to make sure it's at 0, 0, 0. Okay, so now this is where it gets exciting. So go ahead and click right there. And it just raised the bit. And now go ahead and get your safety glasses.
You first, Zach.
Yeah.
Remember, you're the inventor. I'm just the
Wow.
mayor.
Yeah. All right, so go ahead and turn it on. Now we tell it the spindle is on. You want to do the honors?
Go ahead.
Start cutting. And the machine is starting to move.
Gives the beer enough time to get cold.
Almost done. Got a long name there.
Yeah. I could have done something from the Old Testament. I decided to go biblical. Talk to my parents.
I guess a minute does really seem long when you're watching your name being
I feel like I'm back at the SATs.
Yeah.
While this is going, I do want to say that, pick up on what Zach said, we now have this at the Harold Washington Library. We have U Media Centers at 11 of our neighborhood libraries. And we now have lines on Wednesday evening at Harold Washington with kids, teenagers. You can't get in. You can't, and they have made it basically, in my view, what a library should be. And Chicago Libraries was just rated as #1 library system in America because of all the technology we brought to the library system and allowing kids and young adults and others to free access to the type of technology that before they could never get, and to actually take their inventions. Yeah. And besides what Zach said about the people he's met and hired there, well, that's me. That's the name. Is Chance the Rapper. Has a whole song about it at the U Media Center where he actually wrote some of his music, etc., and actually making the library through technology a whole new creative space for the kids in our neighborhoods throughout the city of Chicago, where we have 80 neighborhood libraries. And if you're really good, we'll get you a six-pack if you invent something.
So so first of all, thank you for coming down to Chicago. I realize that you guys are busy, but
Thanks for that acknowledgement. Yeah.
And no, I really appreciate
We're plowing our streets there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's snowing up there. We're down here in the sun. No, but I seriously appreciate the fact that you guys are really acknowledging that digital manufacturing is important and giving not just adults but kids free access to start getting involved.
I want to. Zach mentioned that we won this federal grant, $320 million, bringing research to the city of Chicago. Here, Zach, let me help you.
Okay. Thanks.
This is an all full-service mayor. We actually open and bear for you.
Oh!
Notice that since mayor's done this periodically, we don't do that. Okay, we just kind of open it and leave it there. But the digital manufacturing, this is where you can actually, for the first time, bring brains and brawns together. Yeah. And people have talked about the new economy over here and something over here. And through the digital manufacturing and what Zach's doing, but you can get people like Zach come up with companies and new inventions and software, and you can get companies like Caterpillar and Boeing and Rolls-Royce, which have been part of this research lab. And literally, you're going to have two parts of the country and two parts of the kind of e-commerce who had never talked to each other, never participated in each other, come together in the new frontier of digital manufacturing. And my goal, why I wanted to be here, besides the 312 beer, obviously, and your company is, because I think Chicago's now going to be the epicenter of what's going to be the most promising field, which is digital manufacturing, where you bring brains and brawns together and create the type of future for every child and everybody in the city of Chicago to participate. So this is a great part of what we're trying to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was it. Thank you.